if you're like 90% of people in the world, maybe even higher than 90%, probably if you want to find out more information about something, you go to Google. So let's walk through how we can use a search engine like Google productively and also kind of identify different types of sources that are listed on the World Wide Web that you could use for research. So let's say you want to do research on Alexander Hamilton. Okay. So Google, within a whole hot second, brings up 197 million search results for Alexander Hamilton. Now, a sane person is not going to read all 197 million results about Alexander Hamilton. Where you're probably going to start is with the basics. So if you can see here on Google, Google does this thing where they give you kind of the basic rundown on the right-hand side, right? A basic identifying information, a brief definition says Alexander Hamilton is the founding father of the United States, right? It says he's a politician, a legal scholar, military commander, lawyer, banker, and economist. My God, he was a busy man. And it also gives some details about his life, like when he died, his wife, and his years of service. Okay, so that's going to give you kind of a very bare bones minimum. Same thing with Wikipedia. Wikipedia is going to have a little bit more detail than this box, but it's still going to not be as much detail as probably you would need for a research paper, okay, or an essay. This is because that Google sort of basics box and Wikipedia are examples of what we call tertiary source. So if I type in here tertiary, okay, that's what it looks like. A tertiary source is a type of source that has very basic information about the topic that you're looking at and doesn't have a lot of depth. Okay, so again, this is a good place if you have no clue who Alexander Hamilton is. This would be a good place to kind of get yourself familiarized with the basics, but it wouldn't be considered an acceptable main source for an essay. What you really want to do with Wikipedia, what will really help you is to scroll down here where it says references. So it'll take you down to this list. These are all of the sources that were consulted by the people working on this Wikipedia page to get information about Alexander Hamilton. So in other words, Wikipedia can help you find more substantial sources about your topic. So for example, it references the book by Ron Chernow. So if we click on that link, here it is right here. It's a book. See if it'll mouse over and give me an image. No, it will not. So this will give you more substantial information. These are all biographies of Alexander Hamilton written by people who've taken the time to research Hamilton's life. So this will be the stuff that'll really be helpful to you when you're doing more research and writing is these kinds of sources. Now, if we go back to the Google results page, and we look at this, we're going to scroll down and you're going to see articles like this one from history.com, right, which is a basic biographical entry about Alexander Hamilton. So stuff like this, the book that we saw by Ron Chernow, the biography, or this article on history.com are examples of what we call secondary sources. So these are people who've taken the time, they've looked in detail about this topic, and they've produced information, but they're not from the time period. These people writing about Alexander Hamilton, this article, for example, they're not people who lived during Hamilton's time, right? These are people who live later writing about Hamilton. Now, of course, we can't talk about Alexander Hamilton without talking about the musical Hamilton, as you can see in these search results here. The musical Hamilton would be an example of art, right? It is art. It is based on Hamilton's life, but it does take some artistic liberties. Like if you scroll farther down, you can see that there's the top art story result, everything Hamilton gets wrong about real life history. So in other words, this is a source that you can watch to kind of give you some more insight into Hamilton, but you should take everything with a grain of salt and do your research on certain aspects of it and see what's going on and the historical accuracy or lack thereof. The other thing that you can see on the right-hand side here under the Google basic information about Alexander Hamilton is it actually has a collection of books written by Hamilton. So this would be the meat and potatoes of what historians look at. This is what we call a primary source. So these are sources written by the person we're looking at or during the time period in which they live. So for example, the Federalist Papers, you can see here, published in 1788. If we click on that, Alexander Hamilton is one of the lead authors with James Madison and John Jay, and you can read them. Like, they are available for free on the internet. And this is the kind of thing where if I, as a historian, want to understand something like what was Alexander Hamilton's views on the Constitution? Why did he believe it was the best form of government? Why did he defend it? I can read for myself from this source, right? Because it's Alexander Hamilton literally writing in defense of the Constitution. So I don't have to speculate what he thought. I can read his thoughts for myself. So when historians like Ron Chernow write his biography of Alexander Hamilton, okay, so here's the book over here, Alexander Hamilton by Ron Chernow. He's looking at writings from Hamilton, writings about Hamilton, writings by people who knew Hamilton from that time period, and that's really what shapes what he's writing. So when you look at Google, just remember that you can use Google, but use it wisely. You're going to have to, as always, evaluate any sources that you find. You're going to have to sort through sources that have very basic information, kind of bare bones information, ones that have more substance, and then going down the rabbit hole, reading the writings of Hamilton or your subject themselves. So learning how to Google in a smart way will help you become a better researcher and help you start to think like a historian.